The Joe Rogan Experience.
Well, what you said made me think of one of the hardest stories I ever did. I did an article for the New Yorker about the sons of Jim Jones.
Oh,
And not everybody died in Jonestown. He had three sons. Two of them were adopted. And they were playing a basketball tournament in Georgetown, Guyana. And this story took place when you remember the Branch Davidians?
yeah.
Now that you're a Texan,
Yeah.
just up the road.
Waco.
Yeah. My editor at the New Yorker at the time was Tina Brown, and she asked me to go, write about the Branch Davidians. And I said, Tina, there are more reporters than Branch Davidians up there right now. I couldn't, but what had been watching the news coverage, and just before, the place was called Rancho Apocalypse, which turned out to be really appropriate. But they sent, before the conflagration, they sent out a van with children, who had grown up in this community. And these kids, as they drove past the ATF and the FBI lines and then the media line, and you could see these children looking out the windows. They were leaving behind everybody they knew. They were leaving behind the only world they knew. And they were going into what? And I thought, what happened to those kids? This must have happened, what will happen to those? It must have happened to children elsewhere. And so I started doing some investigation, and I found out that, Jones had these three kids, three young boys. They were young men. And there was Jim Jr., who was black, and then there was Stephen, and who was the natural son, and then there was Tim Jones. And for whatever reason, they hadn't talked to anybody, and they agreed to talk to me.
Wow.
And perhaps it had to do with, the Branch Davidian thing that was going on at that same time.
So this was in the early 90s?
Yeah, it was 15 years after Jonestown. It was actually almost exactly 15 years. And there's a cemetery in Oakland where most of the 900 bodies were buried. And they took a earth mover and took a hill down, half of a hill. And then they stacked all the caskets up and covered it again, but it still has this distortion, and you can see, what remained of the Jonestown followers. But it was interesting to me that the people who joined the Jones cult were all good people. They were all, it was started in Indianapolis and then it moved to the Bay Area. And it was largely largely black. Jones was very, very progressive, on race. But a lot of good-hearted people involved in it. And he was a big figure in San Francisco at the time politically. His support was sought after. He was admired as a community leader, but he was totally crazy and paranoid, and suddenly decided he had to remove the entire group. And you can't tell your family, you can't tell anybody. You're going he sent his sons down to Guyana to clear the jungle so they could make this village. And then overnight, they moved, nearly 1,000 people to South America, and leaving behind all their friends, their jobs, and stuff like that. One day, they've been, removed. They've been raptured, off to South America. And so I was interested, in learning more about it. But these young men were totally haunted. But you would certainly relate to Tim Jones. He was physically one of the very powerful. He curled 100 pounds with either hand. But he couldn't get on an elevator. The last time he tried to do an airplane flight, this has been years ago. I don't know if it's changed for him now, but he made the airplane turn around and drop him off at the gate, which is hard to do. But when you're, as physically overpowering as Tim was, he's kind of a formidable figure. And
so he just had all sorts of anxieties.
So I went to talk to him, and he said, "I'll do it on one condition. We have to do it in a public place, a restaurant, someplace where I won't cry. And I want my wife there because I never told her about it." And
wow,
it's a little hard for me to tell this story because we went to a restaurant, and within 5 minutes he was crying, and pounding the table, and the waiter was keeping his distance. People in the restaurant were, frightened. And he told the story of going back. He's the one who had to identify 900 people. His natural birth parents, his adopted parents. He had a wife and children then too. They were all dead. Everybody was dead. And I've never forgotten the power of a religious belief in a personality like Jim Jones, who could persuade all those people to stay with him, train them in this, suicide drills night after night, and then one day it's real. And, the boys felt guilty because they thought if they had been there, they might have been able to stop it, but probably not.
Catch new episodes of the Joe Rogan Experience for free only on Spotify. Watch back catalog JRE videos on Spotify, including clips. Easily, seamlessly switch between video and audio experience. On Spotify, you can listen to the JRE in the background while using other apps and can download episodes to save on data cost, all for free. Spotify is absolutely free. You don't have to have a premium account to watch new JRE episodes. You just need to search for the JRE on your Spotify app. Go to Spotify now to get this full episode of the Joe Rogan Experience.